So there is a brand new shooter in town by the name of The Finals. It has actually just had its beta over the weekend. It's actually not the first time that it's had a beta, but the other times have mostly been PC only, and I think I was away for both of the previous ones. However, this time around I did finally get a chance to play it, and I have definitely got plenty of thoughts about the game so far. So today we're pretty much going to be doing my review on The Finals beta so far. Before we get into it, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more shooter content, and while you're there, be sure to go and check out the new gaming channel. We are getting very close to the big 1k subscribers, and dropping a sub on that channel would be a massive help. I'm going to be doing a setup tour once we hit 1k as well, so make sure you don't miss out on that. But with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. Now, firstly, for those who don't know, this game is actually made by Embark Studios, and that is a studio that was essentially founded by ex-DICE developers, Patrick Soderlund being essentially the main man behind that, but there are definitely a lot of other ex-DICE devs at the team as well, and pretty much all of them came from working on Battlefield. So obviously I've covered a lot of Battlefield here on the channel, and because of that I've always had a fair bit of interest in this game, simply because obviously these guys were around during the peak of Battlefield, and they have taken their expertise over to the new studio known as Embark Studios. Now I'm going to go through essentially my pros and cons. I do have a few of each. There's actually a few things that I do definitely think are more on the negative side, but probably more of this is on the side of the pros, so I'm definitely going to start off with the pros. Now the first thing that I want to say is this game looks absolutely amazing. It's got amazing graphics, the design of the maps and all that, it all looks absolutely amazing. The general aesthetic for the game, in terms of just it's very bright and vivid and highly saturated with color, it all looks genuinely amazing. There's also a lot of destruction and stuff too, so the maps do get blown to bits, which not only, I'll kind of get into that a little bit more in a second, but not only in terms of the gameplay side of it, it just looks amazing as well. So I will say I don't think, you know, graphics and the way a game looks are all that important at the end of the day when it comes to a shooter. We've seen the success, for example, of BattleBit. That game looks like it's freaking Minecraft, but it obviously plays very well, and that's all that really matters. But I do think that when a game looks really nice, that is definitely kind of the cherry on top, and yeah, this game definitely has that in spades. Now, like I just mentioned, there is plenty of destruction in this game as well. I would actually argue the destruction is potentially deeper than it ever was in Battlefield, now that I actually think about it. Back in Battlefield 4, the destruction was really, really good, but it was still a little bit set in stone in what could and couldn't be blown up. Whereas in this game, it essentially feels like pretty much everything can be blown up. I haven't seen full buildings razed to the ground, but I have seen like the flooring of buildings, for example, getting blown up. I feel like in Battlefield, it used to either be the walls were blown up, or if the flooring and stuff was blown up, it would be the whole building that would come crashing to the ground. And obviously those buildings were kind of on rails, where once you shoot out the bottom walls, for example, the whole building would crash, and it was almost a bit like an animation. Whereas in this game, it is essentially wherever you put an explosive, that thing is going to blow up. So the destruction is very, very good. Now, in saying that, I didn't see all that much of it myself personally. There are a couple games where there was just like moments of crazy destruction, but it wasn't something that I saw consistently either, even though in the trailers that was kind of the main thing that they showed off, which was definitely a very big selling point. Now, I already touched on the look for the game, but like I said, the general aesthetic for the game is also really cool. Like I said, it's very bright. All of the character designs and stuff, all the, skins and everything for your weapon, they all look really, really good, and just the overall general aesthetic for the game is really nice. It's very different than a lot of shooters. Most shooters that are a bit more, I guess, grounded in reality, they generally look a bit darker and grittier, which is definitely good in those cases. For example, we wanted that in Battlefield 2042 and they didn't really give it to us. However, this game isn't really going for that dark and gritty tone. It is essentially like an arena shooter where you can actually look around outside the map and you're actually in an arena, and so this is all essentially faked. It's almost like this is some like alternate reality that they're fighting in. It's almost like some sort of VR game or something like that. And yeah, just the overall aesthetic for the game is really, really good, and because it isn't set in like a real war, they can kind of get away with that a lot easier. Now, I also kind of touched on the map design, but the verticality of the maps is so good. It's something that I've been missing in Battlefield 2042 when I played that. It's just the sort of ground level combat that, don't get me wrong, can be good a lot of the time, but I think I do miss a lot of like Battlefield 4 maps, for example. They had a lot of verticality where you could get on top of buildings and all that kind of thing. And in this game, there are like multiple story buildings that all have like planks going across them, and you can pretty much run across the rooftops. You could borderline play this game without ever pretty much touching the ground whatsoever, and it definitely makes it just kind of adds a different flavor, I guess. It's something that I haven't experienced for quite some time now, because when it comes to Battlefield and even like Call of Duty, they're all very much based on the ground, and it is nice to have that added bit of verticality. I think it makes the map design a hell of a lot better. I will also say that the ideas for the modes themselves are really unique and interesting. I haven't really played anything like the modes that were available in the beta. They're all mostly like 3v3v3. There is one mode I think that is 4 teams of 3 going against each other, and they're not similar to really anything that I've played either. A lot of them are, for example, collecting what are called coins in the game. It's essentially collecting money. There'll be vaults that open up throughout the map, and it's pretty much down to every team fighting over those vaults. So everyone kind of gets drawn to, you know, one area of the map. They're fighting over the money, but then obviously every time you kill someone, they drop money as well. So if you get a squad wipe, you're going to collect a hell of a lot of money. But then it's not just about keeping the money. You've actually got to then deposit the money in these certain terminals, and if you do that, it will kind of, I guess, add that to your team's total, and it will kind of lock that money in, and it will go towards you, you know, winning the game, for example. But if you die with all that money, then you lose it, and the people who killed you can pick that money up. It just kind of creates this like craziness. It's almost a bit like, in a way, Capture the Flag, except there is no like home base and, you know, enemy team base. It's pretty much just Capture the Flag, but it's always moving around, and instead of one flag, it's like heaps and heaps of little flags in the form of those coins. So that's just one mode. There are multiple different modes in the game, and yeah, they're very unique and just very different, which is something I'm keen on, because yeah, we've been playing the same sort of modes in every shooter that we've all played for the last 10 or so years. The last time I really had a big change in the game modes was probably like the Battle Royale genre coming about. So I'm definitely a big fan of the modes, and hopefully they get even more interesting as we actually get our hands on the full game. Now, the last pro that I've got here is to do with essentially, I guess, what you'd call the class system. I don't know if they've got an actual name for it, but the characters in the game are essentially either light, medium, or heavy, and it's essentially an actual change in their body type. So the light characters are obviously very small. They're actually certain areas of the map that, you know, they can only fit under. For example, there'll be little like vents in the walls, and the small players are genuinely like very, very small characters. It makes them very quick. They can get into those tight spaces, for example, but then they obviously have a lot less health. There's then the medium characters, who are just a bit more balanced in the fact that they're kind of what we would know in any other shooter, for example, sort of medium pace and yeah, medium health pool and stuff like that. But then there's the heavy characters, who are a lot slower, and they're essentially a tank. They run with like LMGs and stuff. It's just a very unique class system. It's not by any means groundbreaking. It's not something that's never been done before, but it's just kind of taking little bits from each other game's class system and putting it all into one. And it's a very unique way to do it. And so far, I actually really like the way they've done that. Now, moving on to the more negative side of things in the cons, there are a few here, but none of them are really game breaking for me. And obviously it is a beta, so we do need to account for that as well. The one that definitely has me a little bit concerned is to do with the fact there are actually no Aussie servers. And that's not just Aussie servers as well. There's only actually 3 different server regions, those being Europe, North America, and Asia. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously the large majority of the world's population are in those areas of the world, so most people who play the game will be fine. But for example, Aussies, and there are many other countries out there who are not in those regions, if they don't add those regions when the game actually launches, well, we are going to be having laggy games pretty much all the time. I was playing on the Asian servers, which, keep in mind, Asia's not that far from Australia. Technically, Australia is actually part of Asia, and yet it was still pretty damn laggy most of the time. There was a few lobbies where I think I was getting like all Aussie players in there, and it didn't really feel that laggy in those games, but there were definitely a few games where even it was like half Aussie players and half people from Asia, and it was definitely, you know, I was on about 100 or 150 ping if I had to guess, which is obviously not very good if that's what it's like when the game actually launches. Now, another negative is to kind of do with just the general gameplay, and this is a very broad thing to say, but it kind of feels a little bit clunky in certain areas. I think there were certain areas of the game that felt really solid, but when it comes to certain areas of the movement, for example, the lateral movement is just way too slow. It feels like you're just stuck in the mud when you're trying to like move sideways and stuff like that. Some of the gunplay moments feel a little bit clunky as well. You can kind of tell that this is their first game in the shooter genre, even though, like I said, a lot of these people have worked on Battlefield and stuff in the past. You can definitely tell this isn't like a super experienced company when it comes to the entire company as a whole, and that really does shine through in a few moments. Like I said, with just the general gunplay and the movement and stuff like that, it's by no means bad. It just doesn't feel as smooth as a lot of other games out there when it comes to, for example, Battlefield, Call of Duty, games like Halo. It definitely doesn't feel, I guess, as smooth as those games do. Another issue that I ran into was mostly for controller players. There are limited settings when it comes to the controller, so I usually bind my melee button, for example, to the B button on the Xbox controller, and then that binds the crouch and prone, for example, to the right stick. I do that for every shooter that I ever play because it means you can just never take your right thumb off the stick unless you need to reload or something. It pretty much puts all your movement into that right stick, but this game does not have have that option. And it's probably the first shooter that I've played in a very, very long time that hasn't had that option. And it made it pretty much unplayable for me. I actually went and downloaded the game for the second time on the PC instead of the Xbox. And I was just playing keyboard and mouse for the rest of my time playing, which is pretty mental for me to do that, even though I am comfortable playing keyboard and mouse, but it's not my preferred, like I'm definitely more of a controller player. So the fact that I went and downloaded it on PC just to try and get some fun gameplay, that probably says a lot about the controller gameplay in general. So hopefully they can tune that up. It definitely felt like it's more of a PC game. It felt similar in the way that like playing Counter-Strike and Valorant, for example, firstly, they're not available on consoles, but they definitely feel like PC games in that if you actually played them with a controller, they just do not feel like, I guess, optimized for controller. And yeah, this game just felt very similar in that way. So obviously if you're a console player, that is not good to hear, and that is something that hopefully they can try and tune up before the game actually launches. Now, the last issue that I had was essentially just to do with a few bugs, and obviously, like I said, it's the beta, so I'm not going to go too hard on them here. The main thing was to do with like some sound issues. There were multiple times where the sound just completely cut out for, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds at a time, and it was a pretty big issue because the game actually does have really good sound design. You can hear footsteps and stuff really well, and so I was relying quite a bit on the audio to try and tell where enemies were and stuff like that, and then out of nowhere the audio just literally cuts out, and pretty much every time it resulted in me dying because I didn't know where the enemies had gone. The audio comes back and then the enemy's either completely gone or they've snuck up behind me and killed me. So that is definitely an issue they're going to need to get sorted before the game actually launches. But again, it's the beta, I can't go too hard there. And even though there were some sound issues, like I said, the sound design was really, really solid overall. So hopefully they can iron a couple of those bugs out before launch. Overall though, I definitely really enjoyed it. The first few games, I'm not going to lie, it felt very unique, and it felt, I guess, like it was going to not be enjoyable, if that makes sense. It's obviously hard to tell after a few games, but it just felt like I wasn't going to like it. Once I switched to the PC though, I honestly had a heap of fun with it. Like I said, there's definitely a few little bugs and just some small tweaks to make in certain areas, but I think they are really onto something here, and it has a lot of potential, and I'm very keen for the game to actually launch so that we can get a better idea of how it's actually going to play. Hopefully it is tuned up a bit more, like I said, for controllers, because as of right now it does feel like a PC game, and if it came out in this state, I think I would actually exclusively play it on the PC, which is very, very weird for me to be saying. For those of you who did also play during the beta though, I'm keen to hear your thoughts as well, so be sure to leave them down in the comments. Like I said, while you're here, be sure to go and check out the new gaming channel. We're covering a lot of Spider-Man 2 content over there at the moment, and we are nearly at that 1K subscriber mark where I'm going to be doing a setup tour, so make sure you don't miss out on that. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.